Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. It's the one and only V, the Guerrilla Economist, coming to you live on this special edition of the Rogue News Roundtable. We have with us two of the main brain trusts that are making things happen out there. The one and only Tim Kirby of Russia Hardcore. You can find Tim Kirby at Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore on the Telegram as well. Tim, do you have your website set up or?
No, there's a reason for that. I hate websites. In theory, my one friend was kind of like, dude, I'll help you set up one. I don't know. I'm just not into the whole website thing, man. As soon as when I was in college in the ancient times of the early 2000s, someone was like, dude, the future of the web, no more websites, man. Everyone's just going to have like a Facebook account. And I've kind of bought into that until I got banned from Facebook. But overall, no site yet. No.
But you can find them on Telegram. And Tim, what's your Telegram?
Yeah, I'm done Telegram, VK, and all that good stuff.
Awesome. And we have with us the man who needs an introduction, the one and only Matthew Ehret is here. You can find Matthew over at CanadianPatriot.org, CanadianPatriot.org, as well as the RisingTideFoundation.net. He has a cacophony of amazing books that you need on your coffee table, in your library, and in the Christmas stockings of those whom you love. Get yourself a good foundation on Western history, where we are and where we are going. Check out Matthew Ehret's website, his books, and his Substack, Substack.com/Matthew Ehret. We're supposed to have Martin Seif on, but I think he might be running late. We'll see what happens. That being said, gentlemen, welcome. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good, Matt. I haven't let you speak yet, so you jump in. You're capable of making a functioning website. You go first.
Well, Matt's in Belgium. He is they don't have electricity there, so he's doing this under firelight. So thank you, Matthew.
Not in Belgium, in Basel, the belly of the beast. So they still allow some of the central bankers to have access to electricity.
Wow.
So I'm so jealous.
I get to reap the harvest of some of their.
You're in the capital of luxury watches. I'm so jealous. I'm so.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of luxury watches. Yeah, definitely the Swiss take pride in their watches.
That's the only thing they have going for themselves is the watches and the chocolate.
Yeah. Are you going to come home with like some kind of new Tissot or something?
Well, I'm pretty committed to my current Tissot. That's how I'm blending in. So that's working out pretty well. I'm not getting any fishy looks or anything. I got my Tissot, so I'm not wearing it right now. I'm coming home with a few extra pounds that Cynthia's not too happy about. The chocolate is bountiful, expensive, but tasty.
The beer is also quite good, I heard.
Yes, agreed.
Yes. So he's under firelight. No, he's in Switzerland, so he's fine. They use wood burning power plants over there ever since they got off the Russian oil. But we're thankful that you have internet and that you have electricity, and you're surrounded by delectable chocolate and absolutely delicious horological masterpieces of beauty and art. So, man, I'm jealous of you. I'm so jealous of you right now.
Oh yeah, dude, me too. I could probably spend just an entire day just of sort of like window shopping for all the different types of watches and all that, you know.
Amazing.
It's crazy expensive, though, I gotta say. I mean, part of the thing is I think the Swiss don't pay a lot of money in taxes, so you see the reflection of, like, today, Cynthia and I, we went for a couple of double espressos, paid 13 francs, which amounts to about $20 Canadian for 2 espressos.
Whoa.
I mean, dude. It was a bit of a jarring experience. We're getting used to it. That being said, they don't expect tips because, unlike North America, where I come from, where they're allowed to break labor laws by paying servers, under minimum wage because they presume they're going to make it up for tips, they actually seem to pay servers a respectable normal wage, so they don't really give you a dirty look, and they don't expect.
There's like the big like the trinity of places that are rough to visit. That's England, Norway, Switzerland, in terms of it just being ridiculously expensive to do anything. So you're kind of caught in the unholy trinity of vacation spots. So you're just gonna have to, I don't know, drink a lot of tap water or something.
And he's in the holy trinity of watches. That's right.
Oh yeah, that too.
And Vacheron Constantin, and we can throw a Rolex in that mix as well.
Oh yeah. Rolex is definitely in the mix. They're the real ones who made the a lot of the classic styles. I mean, if you look at it, there's a reason why Rolex is popular, not just because it has like the brand name, it came from somewhere. Like a lot of the defining styles of watches, that's all them. So good on them for doing it, and good on Vostok for doing it in Russia for $200.
I love Vostok.
I do too. Where is it? Hold on.
It's the AK-47 watches. You can get them on Amazon.
Are they quality? Like, do they have? Because somebody tried to convince me to buy one of those, but I have
a few.
Oh yeah, it's the movement's made in house. This is the Vostok's equivalent to the Rolex Hulk.
Yeah,
right
you can have the Rolex Hulk. You can have one that kind of looks like it for $200. Your choice.
And it'll last a lot. You cannot kill a Vostok. A Vostok is an AK-47. It is. You cannot kill it.
Well,
I
we'll
love
go Vostok here. So.
Damn.
And it used to have the exact same colors as my kid's old soccer club that he used to play for.
Nice.
C'est la vie. Now I have to get a new one.
C'est la vie. Man, gentlemen, there are so many things going on in the world. We have, I don't know if you guys got the latest bombshell information, but it turns out it was not the United States that blew up Nord Stream. It was Ukrainians who blew up Nord Stream.
Or, didn't the Wall Street Journal say it was actually anti-Putin forces from within Russia? Oh. So it was technically the Russians, but the Russians were against the Russians.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, that's what it was. But it wasn't the U.S.
Wishful thinking, it's amazing. Like the level of make-believe here is really unbounded. It's
unbelievable, man. It's and if you notice how quickly the narrative is changing right now, Bakhmut, which they're talking
guys,
about.
I got to vanish for a second. I'll be right back.
All right, no problem, man. Do you think? They're talking about Bakhmut and how Bakhmut is like this. It's so important, and the Ukrainians are going to win. They're going to push back against Bakhmut, and and it's such an important strategic point. And now the Ukrainians are tucking tail and running, and they're collapsing in over themselves. I mean, even it was just a few days ago, Matt, that I was reading articles on the Wall Street Journal that the Russians were fighting the Ukrainians with shovels. That's how impoverished the Russian military are. But somehow they were able, with the shovels and rusty pliers or whatever tools they were using, they were able to push the Ukrainians out of Bakhmut. And now all of a sudden the narrative is changing that Ukraine is going to lose Bakhmut, to Ukraine is going to lose the war, and then Ukraine is being blamed for blowing up Nord Stream. I think the U.S. is trying to get out of this mess they created for themselves. What's your take? Matt, you there? Did we lose you? Hello? Maddie, you there? I think your video feed is probably eating into the bandwidth. Darn the Swiss, delicious chocolates, amazing watches. But internet, who knows? Who knows? Maddie, you there? Matt, you there? Maddie? Hello? I lost Matt. And Tim has left me. I'm flying solo. There you go. Hopefully Matt comes back in. Yeah, so if you notice, folks, how quickly they changed the narrative. Oh, Bakhmut is everything. Bakhmut is important. But now all of a sudden, Bakhmut is nowhere to be seen. And
I'm sorry, guys. Something actually got the very rare knock at the door. A rare event. But anyways, I'm sorry, I kind of missed out here. I think did Matt vanish? Did the hamster get tired?
He has to go find a new hamster to place under the hamster wheel to power the internet. But
so
I was just talking about I was just about to ask him the question. I'll ask you, Tim.
Yeah.
Leading up to the whole situation of Bakhmut, they were talking about how strategically important. He's back, Matt. You there?
Oh, he's back. Hello. Oh, wow.
Oh, good. He changes.
That's a completely different angle, completely different lighting. It's amazing how that works.
How does he do that?
I just changed the settings on the holodeck here.
Oh my God! I know we're going to talk about the situation in Ukraine, which is more important. But man, this luxury environment, we got the luxury watches, that crown molding. This is what happens when you go turn 40. All I can see is just that gorgeous crown molding in the background. Wow, Matt, amazing! Perfect environment to sleep. You look at that molding and you're like, this place was made well. But anyways, what was your question, V? I didn't hear the second part.
I was just asking Matt before the hamster got tired and it fell out. He had to go find a new hamster as well as a new background to go sit under. But the whole narrative is changing. Before, so Ukraine is going to win. Russians are fighting the Ukrainians using shovels. They're running out of ammo. Putin's going to die next week. To now, all of a sudden, is the headlines all over the American newspapers right now are that Ukraine is going to lose. And now Lloyd Austin, the affirmative action hire over at the Pentagon, has come forward and said
Wow.
Has come forward.
Sorry, things just got real. Excuse me.
Sorry. So has come forward and said that now Bakhmut is not a big deal, but Ukraine might lose the war. And then they blame the Ukrainians for blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, which it seems like they're just throwing Ukraine under the bus. And the United States is trying to weasel itself out because they're running out of ammo. They're running out of supplies. So that was the question I postulated. Matt, why is it all of a sudden we have a changing of the tide suddenly?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a secret that they've overplayed their hand. You know, like the brainiacs trying to manage the rules-based international order definitely had a certain scenario that they were committed to last year that involved the collapse economically on every level of Russia by a few months in max of the military intervention in Ukraine. That didn't pan out. You know, they didn't quite anticipate that India was going to absorb so many Russian exports of natural gas, of other things that are so vital for the Russian economy, as well as India's economy on a discount, as well as Turkey, Saudi Arabia, other countries that are more than happy to, increase their purchase of Russian, natural, not just natural gas, but a whole wide array of exports. China, big, obviously. Yeah. So, I mean, the whole world is transformed, and these assholes are just completely committed to their script. They don't know how to adjust. And so I think at this point, you've got very weak and desperate attempts at troubleshooting going on left and right. The Seymour Hersh thing had, it's a bit of a mixed bag. The way I see Hersh, he's kind of representative, kind of like Jeffrey Sachs, of a more rational grouping within the oligarchy, within the liberal intelligentsia, I wouldn't even say intelligentsia, the liberal oligarchical faction, which is not a good moral thing, but they're just a little bit more into their self-interest, who deploy some of their assets, like Hersh, like Sachs, to try to put forth feelers to see if it's possible to abort dysfunctional scripts when they prove to be, necessarily abortable. So I think you've got a certain infighting going on within groupings representing different outlooks of the oligarchy right now, kind of like we did in the buildup of World War II. It wasn't necessarily a given that Britain wasn't going to continue its pro-Hitler policy in the 1930s before the ouster of the Nazi, the Nazi king, the guy who, Edward the Eighth, who taught young Elizabeth the Hitler salute. They had to manufacture a little drama to get him out of there. And then to, a couple of years later, oust Neville Chamberlain, another pro-Nazi prime minister. But I mean, that wasn't a given that was going to happen. That was a lot of infighting, a sort of civil war amongst the oligarchical class, which even continued throughout the war, right? Like some factions of the oligarchy wanted to put Oswald Mosley into a position of dominance and get rid of Churchill. And Churchill wasn't a good guy. He was more loyal to the empire than he was to Hitler. That's the best thing that could be said to the guy about him. But he was a bit of a troubleshooter in that sense, but still a disaster of a human being and a rabid fascist, racist, genocidalist. And the oligarchy sort of in that thing today where they were really good at setting up a program, at building up the foundations over decades of a new world order that looked so nice on paper. And now the thing is blowing up in their face, and they're doing what they always do. I think Olaf Scholz, his visit to Washington is interesting, that this is being timed at this moment. I don't know exactly. What do you guys think, actually? What do you guys think of Olaf Scholz?
I just want to say that it's both interesting and a complete secret, because they specifically said nothing to the press about what was discussed, which generally leads one to believe that it was something very negative or something that would make NATO look even more rocky and shaky than it is right now. I just wanted to say one thing too about you're kind of getting into a little bit of a discussion on like whether historical events are inevitable or not. And I just wanted to jump in because a lot of Russian sort of the more our reality, other people's conspiracy kind of writing sphere always proposed that essentially because the West supported Hitler for a long time, it was inevitable that he'd attack the Soviet Union. And no, it's not. He could have delayed it or kind of just been like, oh no, I'm not ready. And then 10 years later, are you ready to attack? I'm not ready. I'm just German. Okay. There's a lot of ways that they could have gotten out of it. So I wanted to give you some props for getting rid of the stupid concept that a lot of people who are more open-minded to alternative information, for some reason, they all sort of believe in this sort of like inevitable destiny of things to come. And again, if the British leadership would have kind of stayed into its mode of the early 30s, things could have been way different in World War II. But yeah, but again, going back to this particular issue, who knows what they discussed, but I do think that probably Biden, I would assume, dressed down Schultz to get him to do what he's supposed to do. Because I highly doubt that. I'm sure there's some people who are thinking that Schultz, he probably stood up for Germany, and that's why they're keeping it a secret. I don't think he's ever going to stand up for Germany, nor would Merkel, nor would really anyone.
I mean, the Germans are finished as a country. I mean, think about
sadly,
this.
yes.
Think about this.
Sadly, one of the great civilizations of our planet is dying right before our eyes. Ironically, in contrast to Hitler, who caused most of this, if you think about it. That's the great irony of Hitler. He is the ultimate anti-German nationalist because he ruined them.
Yes, he did.
But anyways.
The funny thing is like, think about this. Germany is a country that just got gang raped by the United States throughout this entire Ukraine debacle. They're like, listen, literally, this is what the U.S. has said to Germany. They put his, like, it's like Biden taking his arm, putting it around little Olaf Scholz, and telling him, listen, we have you gang raped, but it's okay, it's all right. Just move all your industry here, and we'll take care of it.
To be honest, here's one thing. Okay, if this is what we might have to call a new phenomenon called incidental MAGA. Because if Biden is going to make America great again by screwing over Germany, hey, if all my cousins get new jobs at factories that pay $30 to $40 an hour, I might be willing to forgive the whole Nord Stream pipeline thing. Because ironically, I think we're sort of the United States, probably some of the powers that be are starting to wake up to the fact that, ironically, they're going to have to kind of go back to thinking of doing things in a multipolar fashion, which means you actually have to have industry and you can't just completely rely on other people. So there's something interesting to this, a little bit ironic, and let them.
What a very fast way to springboard American chip manufacturing than to bring Siemens on board. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, let's take all of it. Sure.
What you've just, this is so important for people to realize, because again, they have a very black and white view of history, very overly simplistic. And in the case of, like, we're talking about what was done to bring in or to abort the New World Order project of the mid to late 1930s that would involve a fascist world order with enforcers. They brought in Churchill. Now, what did Churchill do? Well, he unleashed what I've tended to call the Churchill reflex. And by the way, is my internet still okay right now? I tried to move closer to the modem, but
on my end,
you're good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're excellent.
And what did that involve? Like in the case of Canada, where I'm from, the policy of the British Empire in Canada, because Canada has just been a geopolitical chess piece. It's never been a nation state ever. Okay. Yeah. It's always been and it's been playing a role on a varying, at different times, killing U.S. presidents, destabilizing the U.S. from the north as the only monarchy of the Americas, completely run by deep state. At other times, and most of the time, serving as a wedge between a potential threat of U.S.-Russian cooperation when the U.S. still had its wits and better moral sensibilities about it, long gone now. That's been Canada's sort of British role. Now, there's been a policy of keeping Canada underdeveloped as a hewer of wood and a drawer of water, as it is known. That means raw materials resourcing only, no industrial development, no scientific or technological progress of any relevant sort that benefits the people. That's been the policy almost consistently for 200 years. Now, World War I was a bit of a shift, because now when the British Empire had to abort and put down their Frankenstein monster, they had to loosen the chains of creativity and unleash certain things that had formerly been verboten in their colonies that would necessitate the increase of the productive powers that would then allow the empire, the center command structure at least, to carry out its goal, which was abortion of its project and live to fight another day. So the Churchill program was, okay, let's allow for a limited unleashing of productive industrialization and creativity and innovation within Australia, New Zealand, Canada, more broadly. Of course, they were still happy to kill Indians. That was
by the millions.
Yeah, they're not human, so whatever. They just multiply like bunny rabbits. So it doesn't matter if we kill off 3 million to give excess food to British soldiers. That whatever. Yep. But despite that, that's sort of the internal contradiction of empire in general, is that every time they have to do something, they have to unleash the thing that they themselves can't control, which is creative thought. And then when you take that genie out of the bottle, it's a bit of a gamble whether you can put it back in the bottle. In the case of Canada, they were able to do it, but it took some assassinations throughout the 1950s, 60s that allowed them to sort of get us back into a cage. But it's never a guarantee. It's always a gamble. And I think that's sort of what's replicating right now with the reindustrialization, reshoring of heavy industry in America that may happen, although even that is incompatible with the Green New Deal.
Exactly.
So Matt, that kind of leads me to think that, so you're sort of implying that for the powers that be, sort of then in the States, they saw the deindustrialization as like some sort of like core policy that was very important, but now they're sort of forced to go against it. Is that how what you're getting at?
Yeah, they created a mess, and now to clean up the mess or to save their ass from the mess that they created, they have to go against the policy that they've been preparing for 60 years since JFK's murder. They have to kind of start undoing a little bit of that, but it again, it just creates a whole mess of contradictions in their own system because they create a whole ideological cult in the masses as well as in the elites that are ideologically against industrial development, but they have to do it. So it's a messy thing, that they have to do.
And they're against it because of the whole like globalist vision, or for some other reason?
Because they've got mathematical models that they've been using as part of their ivory tower view of what a depopulated, 1 billion people living at sustainable levels in equilibrium with Gaia. That's been since the early 70s when it really got off. So they have just been completely committed to that mathematical way of trying to organize society, which denies the existence of metaphysical concepts like freedom, dignity, God, soul, like things that you can't chart in a computer model. It's not permitted to be acted or acknowledged by these Borgs. They're mathematical positivists. So, but the reality is that these things do exist. And they kind of know it. I think at the inner levels, maybe not at the lower levels like Davos, where you see these idiotic creatures who are just brainwashed in the system, prancing about. They don't know anything. They're fucking idiots. Klaus Schwab's a moron.
Yes,
but it's still a little bit higher up into the higher governing strata from these auxiliaries. Yeah, they kind of know that they need to crush this natural aspiration of human creativity to come more into harmony with God's creation, which is what we do when we feel proud of ourselves, when we feel love and health for a desire to keep our souls healthy, to do good for our kids and those to come after our bodies die.
Yeah.
Like that's a natural human thing, which every time we act in this way and we cultivate our cultural powers of love of beauty, goodness, truth, we always leap beyond the limits to growth. And the oligarchy knows that, but they also know that their whole formula doesn't work if they allow it. So it's like that old story of Zeus and Prometheus, like Zeus didn't allow for, in the case of Aeschylus' story, it's a wonderful example allegorically of this thing where Zeus had a whole way of banning the use of the knowledge of fire from the mortals, who were expected to behave like good little animals eating cud, living in caves. And Prometheus, disagreed with that. Stole the fire, gave it to man, and took the pain, took the sacrifice as a real Christ-like figure, right? Who gave his all because he despised the evil that Zeus was, and he loved the potential of what human beings could be. And so he let that vulture eat his liver every day for 10,000 years. And Zeus was like, "I'll let you go. Just tell me how." Because Prometheus, what does it mean in Greek? It means foresight, the power to see the future.
Well, yeah, I see. Huh.
Yeah. And Zeus knows that Prometheus knows how Zeus is gonna get destroyed in the future, and he's like, just tell me, and I'll let you go. I'll let you avoid the suffering. And Prometheus doesn't let up, despite that. And he's very clear in that story that it's because of the love of mankind, the potential that allows him the strength to do what he does. And every time you see a Martin Luther King Jr. figure, a John F. Kennedy, a Lincoln who dies for something higher than themselves, they're all invoking, awakening that Christ-like Promethean spirit. Right. And the oligarchy is deathly afraid of that stuff taking off. And I think right now in Russia, China, there's a lot more potential for Promethean identities to emerge
And something that I want to actually reveal here, because I don't think I've revealed it publicly on video yet, but I've made 2 recent visits to the Duma. Don't worry about what it's related to immigration. That's not what I want to talk about. But sort of on camera, off camera, quiet part said loudly. Apparently, in the State Duma, they have a mission to have it be so that there are 500 million people in Russia within 2 generations. So about these like alternative visions for the future. So again, Russia is going to be even more irking the ire of the globalist faction, because they want to then triple the population within 2 generations.
Yeah,
some of that's going to involve immigration. Yeah.
That's awesome. And it's really funny. The question that I like to pose, and like what Matt said, which is absolutely hard-hitting truth, and what you're saying as well, Tim.
Yeah.
The question is, do the globalists hate Russia and China enough do they hate them more than they love their ideology of Gaia and the greening of the world and the planet, right? I mean, because think about it, like what you said earlier, Matt, in order for them to onshore U.S. industry, it is to hate their very ideology of what they're standing for, right? So this is the dichotomy they're caught with. Do they love their ideology more than they hate the Russians and the Chinese?
That's
an interesting one.
That is a good paradox. Something should be written about that.
I don't know. Let me try to go with one thing that's been very good. One thing that they did do, about with the elites, and I think one thing that's another thing about the changing nature of the elites is, as soon as they put up this financial iron curtain that exists between now Russia, Iran, and the West, that was a real moment why a lot of people left. Like 1,300,000 people left because their financial destiny was tied to the West, and that was a lot of the oligarchs. For example, one of the biggest banks in Russia is called Tinkoff. Mr. Tinkoff is gone. He gave up on the bank, and now he's in London. So in some ways, there's a new potential for the elite that are here to maybe become a slightly different type of elite. Of course, they're all going to have nice cars and a lot of money and all this stuff.
They'll be a pro-nationalist elite.
But yeah, now the character's different, because we see with the Russian ultra-rich, like, the billionaires who left and who stayed.
It's pretty funny, Tim. Like, I remember dealing with Tinkoff Bank approximately just a couple of months right after the sanctions, and they were one of the banks that we're looking at for one of my clients' offshore operations. He's not an American, full disclosure, so on and so forth. And but anyway, and I marveled at the fact that at that point Tinkoff was not on the sanctions list.
Yeah,
could have at that point. I don't know if they were turned back on.
It is on the list now as of like a week or 2 ago. Yeah.
There you go. But for a long time they weren't.
That's because Tinkoff was very globalisty in his sort of way of doing things, and they were extremely submissive in their attitude towards the United States. Like, in theory, if you're a U.S. citizen, basically, if a bank, from what I understand, if a bank wants to do business in the United States, they have to submit the financial information of every U.S. citizen that uses that bank the world over. And Tinkoff was very good at that. So guess what? As soon as I started doing a lot of voice acting work via Tinkoff, I started to tell the IRS all about everything I did, just in case. Just in case.
Don't show back to the U.S. and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Tim, you're not missing anything here, man.
It wasn't that much voice acting.
We're a train wreck away from having another egg shortage, so you're not missing anything here.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of eggs here, so that's nice. But anyways, that's kind of weird, and I have to say that it's the strangest bank because it actually has no offices. It exists completely like online. It's like a digital bank concept, which means the service is terrible. It is the worst service of any bank I've ever used. It's an absolutely baffling, futuristic experience. It's like, on the Starship Enterprise, how they could kind of just talk to that voice computer that hears them. It's kind of like that, but imagine the voice has no idea what you're talking about. And then there's maybe multiple voices, and they're all trying to communicate with you. It's amazing. So it's a wonderful experience, but I kind of have to use it because one of my favorite voice acting clients insists on it, so I'm stuck with them for now. But
there's an interesting bank in Canada. It's a branch or a subsidiary of ING, and which is a Rothschild inter-alpha group bank, ING, right? One of the big 11 banks that are part of the Rothschild octopus in Europe. And so they created a subsidiary a few years back in Canada called Tangerine. Sounds all nice. Now, they have little oranges you can always grab whenever you go to the one outlet that exists in Canada if you can get there. But the whole thing's digital, and the thing they pay you $50 to $100 to open up a bank account, and they give you commissions of $50 to $100 per person you refer to the bank who sets up an account. It's ridiculous. No interest, no fees, no nothing. So full disclaimer or disclosure, I use it. Yeah. However, it's evil. And I mean, you could see what they're doing. But it's absurd that they would be able to offer that level of incentives, which they say, it's because we don't have any overhead costs. We don't have any outlets or people that we pay. So of course the services is shit, but that's how we're able to give all of this money. Now, obviously they're just trying to attract people into like a one-stop shop, as if it wasn't bad enough already with the too big to fails being what they are. Yep. That is going to be that much more easy to just sort of control people's spending, behavioral modification as part of the whole transformation of the Great Reset agenda that's planned out. But let me ask you this, Tim. Are there such a thing as too big to fails at this point in Russia, or is there like a wide diversity of banks in operation?
Definitely. In terms of things or businesses that are too big to fail, RŽD, the railroad company, the main one, the Aeroflot, the airline. No matter what happens with airlines, Aeroflot will never go under because they keep it up.
Is it Aeroflot? I thought it's Aeroflot.
Dude, it depends on your pronunciation, but I think that Aeroflot sounds nicer. Okay, but it is written FLOT in Russian. Flot. It would be Flot. Yeah. Okay. So there's that. Now, when we're talking about banks, it's Sberbank probably because they're really the main bank of Russia. I believe 75% of bank machines in the country. So 75% are Sberbank, and the other 25 are everyone else. And when you're talking about people who live in more isolated areas, really the only bank there is Sberbank. So Sberbank is definitely too big to fail. It would cause, like if Sberbank, say, failed as a system around Moscow with, just say, bank machines, you can't take out cash. Well, there's VTB, which is number 2, and it's still a very large institution. There's a bunch of other stuff. But if you were out in like, Kamchatka or something, that could really cause a massive crisis. Sure. Because there's only Sberbank. So there exists. Sberbank is definitely too big to fail. And from what I understand, like the Gazprom Bank is actually was very important with these major transactions of, okay, we're going to send you X million barrels of oil per day, week, or whatever for this amount of money. And it was, I think, the real Gazprom Bank where a lot of that was actually done, from what I understand. So that one. So is probably it. Of course, there's a few more minor banks, but over time, Matt, unfortunately, the sort of mom and pop gangster banks of the 90s have closed down. There's been a massive decrease in the number of available banks since the 1990s here. So
I'm not intrinsically for like having a wide array. Like generally speaking, if your nation is under the control of if it's a captured state run by a death cult of oligarchs, then it's preferable to have small banks, like a wide diversity of local banks. However, if you actually have a legitimate governing structure with patriots who don't want to kill their people and destroy their cultures in a governing like situation, having central, having big banks that are under the command of a national constitution and national mandate, that's not a bad thing either. It's all relative.
No, especially whereas in Russia, one of the things is the way the laws are. The problem is, I don't know the details of this. We'd have to get someone on, but I can see by the facts of it that in Russia, sometimes it can be much harder to get a loan. Why? Because if you don't pay the loan, generally they consider the bank screwed up because they gave a loan to an unreliable person, if that makes sense. So a lot more of the responsibilities on the bank, whereas in like America, anyone can take out a loan once they're 18, whatever, because no matter what happens, the person who took out the loan is always at fault and it's their problem no matter what happens. But then you also get into weird stuff where like, when I bought my second house, because I didn't buy it in cash, and now that I bought an apartment, I both times had to basically pay for insurance because they're like, well, what if you die? So maybe in America you could take out a loan without having to buy a life insurance plan. So that can kind of bump up the costs. But at the same time, it is a little bit, you sleep a little bit safer knowing that generally the law is on your side if you miss a couple payments or something, you know?
Yeah. Right.
Matthew, what's the European take on everything that's been going on? I mean, first of all, tell everybody where you've been up to. You've been in conferences all over Europe. Why don't you share with us what you've been up to and what the general attitude of people are over there with everything that's been going on?
Well, it's not that different from anything I mean, obviously, when we go to the sorts of conferences that we go to, we Cynthia and I spoke at a conference just about an hour's drive west of Dublin about a week and a half ago. It was a Think Local conference. Alex Craner was there live speaking.
Yeah.
Ellen Brown, Catherine Austin Fitz. There was a pretty wide array of people who were invited to speak over the course of a full day. About 250 attendees came, and it was great. I mean, everybody was pretty much to varying degrees so-called initiated in they were people who weren't surprised by the fact that we're run by a bunch of, oligarchs and the system's collapsing. Yeah. So they were there to figure out, like, what do you do? Obviously I'm kind of a big think kind of person. So our job was to sort of set a bit of contextual dynamic, showcase a little bit of what is going on in Eurasia. How do you have a different system being fought for and defended right now, representing humanity and humanity's genuine self-interests amongst the Eurasian powers, and how that could completely transform the entire rules of the game that are shaping the transatlantic, Titanic world that we're all sort of finding ourselves in. But you also had a lot of people who were there to present on the topic of agriculture becoming, self-sustaining as far as your food production needs, having a community, having an integrated network that could support local families, local banking, things like that, decentralization. That was a topic of discussion too. And so that was interesting. It was very gratifying to have so many people who were just hungry for truth come by. There's obviously, in the case of Ireland, a lot of disappointment, since the one singular party that had any hope of showcasing in actual political fashion some resistance was Sinn Féin. And since Gerry Adams, who had run that is sort of known as the more political official branch of the IRA, which itself kind of started off really good by partisans of Abraham Lincoln in the late 19th century. And after World War II, just like everything kind of good, became infiltrated by Operation Gladio fascists and the CIA, MI6, and was turned a little bit more radicalizable. And all that to say, Sinn Féin was still sort of the political branch. And after Gerry Adams was ousted, a CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, devotee was brought in, who's just, ultra maximum liberal, and anything the Anglo-Irish establishment want, they're going to double down and only sound like they're a resistance because there's not enough LGBTQ XYZ legislation or COVID lockdowns or whatever else. So that's something that has to be figured out. Obviously, there's finally a motion towards an anti-war movement across Europe. I mean, every day there's something else happening that's not being talked about by the media, but that's growing in amplitude finally, long overdue. I don't know why it's taken so long. I mean, I have my hypotheses, but there's generally a recognition that all of Europe is being set up to become sacrificial lambs.
Absolutely.
And the whole, like, as you're pointing to, the mystique around, the great Ukrainians coming out victorious against evil Putin is really weak at this point. Lavrov, alluded a few weeks ago to Moldova being used as a new zone where the Western, oligarchs are trying to sort of like light another fire. You got Georgia riots are happening in a bizarre way, implying in my mind that there's more fires.
It is.
Hungary, obviously, Samantha Powers is prancing about trying to activate the various, NGOs that are part of the CIA complex there to oust Orban.
Sick.
There's a whole bunch of things that are I think they're trying to desperately do, but I think the European population overall is sick of it. There's just a lack of ability culturally to just organize in a coherent way so far.
One thing, Matt, where do you think this desperation comes from? Because about 10 years ago, it seemed like very much we were in their grip, and especially Europe. And now all of a sudden they're acting in desperation. What's changed?
That's a good question. You mean the oligarchy is desperate?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, definitely. I don't think it would surprise you guys. Maybe one or two people listening might be a little bit about this, but obviously the Belt and Road Initiative didn't exist 10 years ago. 2013 was the inaugural, October 2013 was the inauguration of the Belt and Road Initiative as a thing, which even it took two more years for that to be respected as a potential rival to the unipolar globalized structure. So that was a factor. Russia's intervention into the rules of the game in Syria was a big secondary factor. That, I mean, Russia started after the Maidan color revolution. Russia started taking things much more seriously. China and Russia together began utilizing their veto that they didn't use in the case of Libya, but they began seriously using it to block the attempts at a liberal humanitarian intervention in the case of Syria that they prevented probably like 12 times. People don't realize that Syria was saved like 12 times because of Russia and China together. So I mean, I think these are factors, but more importantly, on a positive level, I think more and more leaders of the secondary sort of, like the Turkey, Saudi Arabia groupings realized that they ultimately are not that essential.
Yeah.
They've played a role for a few decades within the context of Henry Kissinger's, and the Zbigniew Brzezinski world order that they built up in the 70s. So yeah, they needed Saudi Arabia to be what it was as a conduit for certain black ops and terrorist funding throughout the 80s and 90s and beyond. And they needed Turkey to do certain things on a similar level that were kind of insidious. And they needed, a few other players, but they're all flushable. They're all ultimately recognizing that they don't really play an essential role. And they've recognized that because of Russia, China, and the broader Eurasian alliance, there's actually a chance to have a different future that involves them having a role to play. And full spectrum economies, China's offered Saudi Arabia the ability to have not just oil exports, but also industrial production for the first time. That was never permitted by the IMF or World Bank. Turkey, as well as looking at the middle corridor of the Belt and Road Initiative, which they play a key role, as well as the north-south transportation corridor of Russia that they could feasibly really benefit from on a massive level. And they're just seeing like, holy shit, that's like 30, 40-year thinking in the future that benefits us. We just have to maybe eat a bit of humble pie. So they're normalizing their relations with Syria. They're saying, finally, I'm sorry. We were wrong. We're seeing a little bit, not officially, but that's what I think the sort of spirit of the bridge building is. Same thing for Iran, is reopening bridge building and diplomatic corridors with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states. Yeah, things like that.
Yeah. Well, I can also say one other thing about why Europeans haven't woken up particularly quickly. You have to remember that all the former Warsaw Pact nations, when they transitioned from communism to capitalism, whatever you want to call it, sometimes we get in a big terminology debate, especially within Russia, about that issue, is you had this process called lustration, where they basically forced everyone who had loyalty to either communism or Moscow out of the government, and everyone who didn't got to stay in. And we also then get into the whole NGO grant machine. But basically, people in Eastern Europe were very much built into this idea that the reason we're poorer than the rest of Europe is because of those darn Russians and the stupid communism, which over time became less about the communism and more about the Russia. And so I think it takes certain people like Viktor Orban, who literally got to the position he's in because he became a favored son, because he worked against communism and against Russia during his youth, who could wake up and also be that objective to be like, okay, they're not communist anymore. They've kind of become more like us. Okay, we'll work with them now. So Orban apparently is a person who actually his head is not in his, between his butt cheeks, which is nice. But a lot of the other leaders within Eastern Europe don't see it that way. I think they're so very much programmed, and not just the leaders, but the masses too. They're very much programmed in this Russia made us poor kind of mentality. But as time goes on and the West is making them poor, yeah, things might change. Things might become a little bit more gray, hopefully. I don't know. Possibly.
Well, what was that word using in your excellent interview with Scott Ritter? Historic momentum, or what is it?
Historical inertia. Unfortunately, I didn't come up with that term. It existed before me. I wish I could claim that I made it up, but it's historical inertia.
Tim,
that events of the past sort of have this momentum, and it takes a long time to get that momentum to vanish. And that's what's happening in Eastern Europe, where people were so programmed into this Russia made us poor, that only now, because of current events, people are sort of starting to change their mind about this opinion, which is from long from the past, which may have never actually been that true. Then again, well, communism really did kind of actually make people poor. So
stiff.
I guess it is Russia's fault.
It had some serious limits.
Yeah, it certainly did. So that's one thing where that's something when you listen to Russia talk about some of its pluses and minuses and its relations, they really like to talk about modern Russia. They don't really like to talk about Eastern Europe under the red flag very much, about good relationships with other countries. It's interesting how we ignore that in Russia, but we do. So yeah. So historical inertia is definitely, the more I live, the more I see this historical inertia factor. It's in everything, even in sometimes what average people believe or how they see things. I mean, there are people who still call Russia communist. They're still just stuck in this mode of, that's the way it was then. So that's
for China too, right? There's a lot of people who, when they think of China, they think of Mao and the Cultural Revolution. They have no other idea of anything else that happened after 1972 or something. It's a.
Well, yeah, of course. China is Mao, even though which Chinese leader said Mao was 70% right, and that really was sort of that moment in Chinese history when they. Oh, was that Deng? Oh my God, I can't remember.
Deng Xiaoping. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, Deng Xiaoping.
It was,
because that was that sort of turning point for them, where sort of it became official that Mao is going to be our historical good guy, but now we're going to kind of take things in a different direction from there. But of course, again, I'm sure there was also a lot of historical inertia based on the way, because they even say that in China, I believe the generation that's maybe 10 years older than we are, who are in the 50s or 60s, who were more like the Mao babies, have a certain way of behavior that's even instilled from that generation they were born in. And even though that those circumstances are long in the past, they still act a particular way because they're just sort of stuck in that time frame. The whole boomerism and this mentality of someone who's 60 tells a 20-year-old, well, your problem is you drink too much coffee and you don't want to work. There's in 1960 that could have been true. You just blow all your money on dumb stuff and you don't want to work. Well, it's your fault you're poor. Things have changed a little bit since then. Again, historical inertia.
It's fascinating to see the rate of change, because where it took the West, 300 plus years to go from a pre-industrial to an industrial civilization where we can expect to live, in the case of Canada, 79 years on age on average. In the case of the US, 76.1. They collapsed 2 years over COVID. China is now improved. China now lives about a year and a half on average older than the United States counterparts do, right? It's a complete wild paradox for people who think that China is just this completely homogenized Borg-like slave class of suppressed, destroyed people. And it's you know what? Look at the longevity charts and compare it to ours, and you're going to see a completely different trajectory.
Correct.
But it's still, on a cultural level, interesting because they've compressed all of that 300 years into 30 years or 40 years.
Dude, that's the same thing here. I'm going to make a video about this. I'm going to ruin my video for people, for the people who watch this and that video. They'll find it very boring now. But I want to make this video coming up where I kind of get into this explanation that for people my age in Russia, okay, their view of America is this oh my God, America's everything. We must worship America. Let's try to join NATO. Let's bow on our get on our knees and hope that they accept us into the West. A lot of that comes from the fact that when they were, basically there's this expression in Russia that we sold out the motherland for jeans and 200 types of sausage. Okay. Because, there's usually only one kind of sausage, and who the hell knows what that sausage was in the Soviet Union. But the thing is those people saw that reality. But my kids, there are 200 types of sausage here now.
Yeah.
They look around and there's cars everywhere. In America, there tends to be more pickups. There tend to be more SUVs here, but they're still big and gas guzzling and 4-wheel drive. So it's for the generation in Russia that's younger, they're in a different universe. And this whole thing of Russia's a poor country and we're poorer than the West. For someone who's 18 years old or less, that's just not true. That's not what they've seen their entire lives. Whereas people my age who live here are much more like, oh my God, America, you must be so rich. Why'd you come to this poor country? You're an idiot.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from.
Interesting. I really want to watch that video. That's good. I know more people.
It's coming.
That's cool. Because I mean, oftentimes the demographic issues are discussed in an acultural, apolitical fashion, which is absurdly incompetent. So to introduce the cultural shape, like dynamics, which are animating the hearts and minds of the people actually living in these generations and interfacing with each other. Same thing for what I was thinking about with the Chinese case. You see this in a lot of the Chinese TV shows that I watch on. It's some of the only quality shows you can get that actually are not just, carrying some evil, insidious agenda as subtext within the storyline of the shows on Netflix. Is just where you actually have like little moral lessons and universal little insights that are like peppered throughout the stories. You don't get that in the West anymore. All that to say, you see these generations interfacing with each other, and you've got people who are in their 60s, 70s, who are still trapped, like you said, in a mindset of scarcity, in a sort of like yearning for the better Western world. And then the young people, it's like a totally different world, where they've only known that we have choices, we got cars, we got like it's not that they're not living in that deprivation. So you've got these interesting generation shifts right now that are I won't say clashing, because in both cases there's a future orientation to their societies in Russia and China that is absent in the West. But it's interesting to see how they play off each other, and fascinating stuff.
Do you watch the one that's the teen drama about trying to become the best bodyguard in China? My kids love that. I don't know what it's called.
No, I haven't seen that one yet.
But it's amazing. Because it's weird, because that's the plot of it, is to become like the best bodyguard in China, but it's also a teen drama. It makes no sense, but it's on TV here.
Well,
so
is it as good as this new series that I'm watching? It's about the superhero. He undergoes a sex change transformation, and he identifies with like at least 52 genders, and he's fighting against the patriarchy. Is it as good as that one?
Oh, I don't know, but that sounds very already stereotypical. But of course, because it's in China, like this one there's a female set of bodyguards, the male set of bodyguards, and the one one of the guys and one of the girls, they sneak out at night and he steals one of the sports cars, because of course they train in sports cars. And, he takes this girl out at night to like the beach and stuff. And I'm like, the one thing is that all of a sudden I can see this was made in China, because all they sort of do is I think they kind of like hug at the end. I'm like, nah, dude, you're taking a chick to the beach at night on a stolen sports car. You're getting more than a hug. But anyways, maybe I think it's better.
But that's the thing. Like, there are these like more wholesome,
very wholesome.
Dynamics between men and women. You don't get just absurdly forced sex scenes or anything like that. You don't get that at all. I mean, there's actually, you can wait a whole season before like two figures who have all this like, energy between them end up even just kissing or something like that. And that's like, you're like rooting at that point. Like they got you like pumped up and you're like, yeah, finally. Which in the case of the West, like we just get bombarded on like the first episode, you're already sleeping with your date and stuff. And it's just,
Well, that's the classic like Japanese love drama. I don't know. Does Fukanuki like me? Fukanuki, could you come over here? Oh no, I bumped into him. Now I'm embarrassed, so I can't tell him I love him. And let's wait 3 more months. That's like the classic Japanese strategy with all of their media. So gotta always kick that romance can down the road and make it more dramatic. So
I like the woke program that we have here in the United States so far. Growing up in the 80s, I was a huge Marvel Comics fan. They've absolutely destroyed Marvel. They've destroyed Star Wars. They had enough content between those two to last the next century, and they ruined everything.
Well, here one thing is if you want to give those movies a second chance, you're going to have to learn to speak Russian very well, because when they air them on Russian TV, they actually very often change the translations to take the wokeness out of it. So it's lots of fun. You get a lot of editing.
It's a hot movie right now. You ever heard of this movie is being highly hot? You can watch it on Netflix. It's called RRR. It's that's
an amazing movie. I watched that twice. I did. We sponsored a review of it on the Rising Tide Foundation website. It is awesome,
dude. It has it's amazing. I haven't seen it yet. And everybody's like, this is like the best movie you've never heard about. You know, they're like, it's the best movie you've never seen.
It's like Rise, Rebel, and Revolt.
Yes.
Yeah, it's this like this Indian patriotic action movie that has everything.
Oh, I see.
On top of like a big fuck you to the British colonialists. It's excellent.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of fire and explosions, which, as you know, Matt, you probably know me. I do appreciate some fire and explosions. So, yeah, looking pretty good.
If you like fire
and musicals.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Well, it is India. Let's not kid ourselves. You got to have a musical number.
Oh, yeah. This doesn't make you watch it. Nothing will. Yes. This is
that actor kind of has Ben Stiller syndrome, where he's extremely jacked, but his face doesn't match his jackedness.
Not to. It's the most entertainment. I've never had more fun watching a film in my life. And it's so over the top, but they embrace it. They make it work.
No person will ever rise up against the British.
See, this is what I tell people in Russia. We need to do stuff like this, and they just refuse. No, we will only make serious movies that no one watches. Only.
No, you got to bring in some of these Bollywood.
Like a grenade on an arrow. Yes.
Yeah.
And first off, there are not enough action scenes where someone jumps through the air shooting a bolt action weapon. We need more of that. That's amazing. Fire damage does more damage. Yes. Amazing.
That's crazy, man.
That's some good times there.
That's such a fun movie, man.
If you're ever feeling depressed or a little bit down or blue or anything like that, just watch that movie. It's like, yeah.
Hollywood cannot do that anymore whatsoever. It's all about messaging. It's all about indoctrination. It's so stupid.
Well, I mean, like that, they could send a sort of fun message. I mean, there's a slight message that obviously they sort of imply that British rule was not so hot. That is a message of a particular type, but they put it in a fun package, you know? So, yeah, I just like, or two, look at the classic, you know, all those 80s action movies and stuff. They generally, when people would see those overseas, they're like, yeah, it's American muscle and all this stuff. Or it was cool. It's just that I think the messaging kind of has to be sort of in the background of the movie rather than in the foreground. And I think it always works better that way. So,
absolutely.
But anyways, good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, last but not least, gentlemen, we're having weekly train derailments here in the United States.
Yeah.
What?
Especially in Ohio.
Yeah.
Oh, this is it. This is what, guys.
Home state.
Well, yeah, that is my home state. I'm from Ohio. Thankfully, if any of you are wondering, the wind and the direction the water flows from that location, both the wind and the water flow away from where my parents live. So thankfully, my parents are going to survive this, which is good news for me. But I want to talk to both of you because I honestly don't have an answer to this question as to why this is happening. I know I've tried to tell Russian people that I've heard for years that we're having an infrastructure crisis in America, that since the end of the Cold War, besides sort of repaving like the major interstate highways, we don't do anything. Right. Everything is the way it was when the Cold War ended. And that's the core part of the problem. But then again, a few years ago, as V mentioned before we went on air, there were a lot of food processing plants that burnt down. Oh, yeah. So is this some sort of invisible American Civil War, or is this the infrastructure crisis that was written about 10, 15 years ago actually coming to be, or is it some other third factor that I'm not aware of? What do you guys think?
It's a bit of both.
Yes, I agree with Matt. I was just about to say the same thing. It's both. It's eco-terrorism. It's basically, these are federal terror cells activated by, portions of the fascist side of the government, where they're literally killing our food production capability, getting things more centralized and integrated. And also I think that whole thing that happened in in East Palestine was definitely some sort of act, but also the other 11 trains have derailed in the last 2 months, and the odds of that happening, I had a statistician, I think it was Jim Willie, that said it was like the odd is like 1 in 12 million. So it's like it's incredible. You never have 11 derailments in like 3 to 4 weeks, and that's what we've had. It's crazy.
Well, so you're saying that is this something an internal government thing, or are you talking? Is this
it's both?
Is this
it's both because you got to understand, the industry doesn't exist in the United States. People are like, bring back manufacturing, bring back industry. If you bring back industry and manufacturing, you're going to have to kill the fire economy, finance, insurance, real estate, the speculative economy. You got to kill it. And it's anathema for the financial powers to bring back actual manufacturing. Manufacturing requires raw materials. Raw materials require a real to market. It requires real price discovery on commodities, which is something Wall Street cannot do in its current state. And then, third, because we went to a full-on speculative economy, the manufacturing base, the industrial base, these are just cottage industries for the financial guys. That's all it is. Go ahead, man.
V, I just sent you something in the private chat. Do you see it? It's a 2-minute YouTube video.
Oh, okay, I'll pull it up.
Well, I think secrets are about to be revealed.
Well, I'm writing an article right now. I just pressed pause on my article to jump on board with you guys. But I'm doing something touching directly on this. And if you guys have not heard about deep green resistance, I highly recommend. Well, you're going to be introduced to it. Let's just watch. This is an eco-terrorist recruitment video on their YouTube page. It's all of 2 minutes,
which is of course not taken down.
Yeah,
no, of course not. No, that's okay.
There we go.
So let's just run that, and then I'll say a couple of words about this.
A lot of the time, deep green resistance gets characterized as an environmental movement, maybe because we have the word green in our name. But I don't think that calling us just an environmental movement really speaks to why I decided to join the organization.
I feel like it encompassed all of these issues that are the problem and just
why do they all look the same?
Tied it all together.
We haven't done very well over the last few thousand.
Well, she looks different. She looks like a security guard in Russia.
We've had these horribly stratified societies where there's the rich and the poor and
I want to listen to this idiot.
And all the rest of it. I don't. What's wrong with saying let's abandon this and do what we did before, which worked.
Yeah,
we didn't destroy the planet for those first 4 million
before
years.
civilization, before industrial civilization. We were
look at this
somehow...
culture and we say the sooner
it's funny.
Listen to this guy. Listen to this guy.
Right.
This thing comes down, the better. The sooner collapse happens, the better. And so we actually lay out a strategy for a way to achieve that collapse, because we believe that not only the natural world, but humans will be better off without this culture. So many of us are living in a state of alienation, in a state of dependence upon a system that's killing us, that's poisoning us, that's feeding us, this toxic imagery, this toxic culture that really destroys, our internal selves, just as it destroys the external world all around us. And we think, it's long past time that this culture came down.
War is being waged against the natural world.
Okay.
This guy is the founder.
You don't
Pen pal of the
wars primarily by
it's Sam Bankman-Fried.
Stop a war is by.
Hold on.
You mean the FTX guy? Yeah, it is.
No, it's not.
I know it's not.
Terror
said
is all
have to
around us.
declare
I mean,
war.
if the living world could
Listen to
speak,
this
it
girl.
would say that it's afraid probably every single day of being gutted and torn down. And so I don't think it's fair to talk about terrorism in terms of protecting those who are terrorized every single day.
The trees.
Yeah.
The rivers. Okay, so you get hit stop there. Okay, so there's 3 things I want to say about this. One of the co-founders who you listened to there, who was describing the need to go to war with industrial civilization, his name is Jensen. I forgot his first name, but he got radicalized as a pen pal of the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, who wrote this giant anti-industrial manifesto as one of the conditions for his surrendering to the authorities after he killed, I think something like 10 people or something. No, it was like 5 people killed, 40 people permanently maimed over the course of 30 years of letter bombs that he sent out, targeting people who he identified as being catalyzers for industrial progress. And thus, because industrial progress is the cause of the destruction of nature, and he had this whole formula worked out that basically said in the stupidest way that as technology increases, freedom goes down, destruction of nature goes up. It's that Ted Kaczynski is a mathematician from MIT. He was an MK Ultra guinea pig.
No.
That is how these assholes think. They are logarithms. They're living.
And I think there's
logarithms.
definitely some historical evidence to contradict that about more or less freedom. I mean, there's well, if you think about the ancient world, I mean, slavery. I mean,
here's the thing: when I'm listening to these dingbat, stupid females talking about it needs to be reset. We had it so right in 4 million years ago. 4 million years ago, she'd be dead without a man.
Yeah.
4 million years ago, she'd starve to death. Somebody would butcher her.
Well,
somebody
and also
rape. On an altar of the rain god to make it
and also
rain.
before
probably have cut her throat on an altar to make the gods happy when the weather was bad.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, people, the much more magical thinking to an extent that we would find insane as modern people. And also remember, if you're talking about millions of years, human beings really only became very, very more human-like as we know us today when we started, cooking food or something. What was that 300,000 years ago? Sorry, my evolutionary timeline's off. But before that, we were a lot more animal-like. So I don't know, where's this 4 million year thing coming from?
Matt said it best. Her heart would have been pulled out of her rib cage, sacrificed to the sun god because there wasn't enough rain that month.
No, or she would have just lived like, the pigeons in the park. They just sort of consume and breathe and die for mysterious reasons that they'd never understand.
And who are these people? They're a bunch of middle class and upper middle class white kids. It's freaking nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. And check this out. Okay, so on their website, on the Deep Green Resistance website, there's a whole action plan, decisive ecological warfare. So this is how they say it, okay? And I'm gonna read the quote from their website. The above grounders will work to build sustainable and just communities wherever they were, and will use both direct and indirect action to try to curb the worst excesses of those in power, to reduce the burning of fossil fuels, to struggle for social and ecological justice. So these are the people who work in the official corridors of Davos or the banking or corporate sector or whatever. They're the above grounders. Meanwhile, the undergrounders will engage in limited attacks on infrastructure, especially energy infrastructure, to try to reduce fossil fuel consumption and overall industrial activity. The overall thrust of this plan will be to use selective attacks to accelerate the collapse in a deliberate way. That's what these assholes are actually saying is their mandate. This is 2011 on their website.
I'd like to point out that based on Russian research, actually most of the endangered species of whales, at least around Russian waters, have all been revived and restored. There's only 2 species of whales around Russia that are still somewhat endangered to an extent. I'm just saying.
You want to know something, man?
These
are people who never lived outdoors. They have no connection with nature.
No.
These are city liberals.
They would hug a polar bear. If they saw a polar bear, they would go to hug it, and they would get their head ripped off.
Yeah, they don't realize that a polar bear is an ultimate killing machine, an absolute killing machine. I'd rather get attacked by a grizzly than a polar bear.
Which, by the way, of the 19 big major polar bear tribes or whatever you call them, schools of polar bear, I don't even know, but that they've been measuring, only 2 of the 19 have seen a reduction of their population over the past 30 years. The other 17 have massively increased. Overall polar bear populations,
it's exploded.
In opposition to everything we've been told, have actually increased massively. And when we see them in water, it's just because they're swimming from one iceberg to another. It doesn't mean that they're drowning or something.
No, they could actually swim for 300 miles.
Yeah, exactly.
I can also attest where we were in Chukotka in the very far east of Russia. We went on some uninhabited islands, and there's bear poop there because they kind of come on the island, they sort of look around for something, and then they leave. They don't actually live there. So that is a part of it. Of course, they're not polar bears. They're a different type of bear, but same logic.
Listen to this, guys. Decisive ecological warfare. Some U.S. intelligence hack wrote this for them. This is a radicalized federal proxy group. Decisive ecological warfare is a strategy of a movement that has too long been on the defensive. It is a war cry. Maybe I should read it in a more a gay voice. It's the war cry of a people who refuse to lose any more battles. That sounds like a real environmentalist, if you ask me.
No.
The last resort of a movement is isolated, co-opted, and weary from never-ending legal battles and blockades. The information in the DWE strategy is derived from military strategy and tactics manuals analysis of historic resistance insurgencies and national libertarian movements. The principles laid out in these pages are accepted around the world as sound. Where do these tree-hugging pot smokers figure this out?
Yeah, I'm sure they came up to this on their own. Yeah.
Well, it kind of reminds me of when they busted that ISIS cell in Cleveland.
You know, I'm sure that Sam Bankman-Fried's body double over here, his stunt double, came up with it all by himself.
Yeah, I don't know. That's real interesting, Matt. But again, maybe something like that is what's going on, or what's behind all this, because it is there's a lot of train tracks, and all you kind of have to do is ruin one part of it to cause a huge disaster.
Yeah, no, I mean, and they've allowed the U.S. has allowed its infrastructure to atrophy consistently for 40 years. You know, like before the 1970s, it was common practice to allocate something like at least 2% of the GDP towards the maintenance and improvement of basic vital infrastructure. After 1971, when the dollar was detached from the fixed exchange rate system, that went down to like 0.01%, so that we were just cannibalizing the sacrifices and creations of the previous generations. And we were just like sort of cruising, not realizing that we were letting everything atrophy. And now we're coming to a point of a breaking boundary condition that we've passed, where like the federal, I mean, I think the recent audit of American infrastructure concluded that $5 trillion needs to be immediately invested into all of this, like the train tracks that are still using 1950s tech.
No, it's even before the end of the Cold War.
Like
wow.
Safety standards. Huh?
I was saying it's even before the end of the Cold War. That's interesting. That's crazy.
Oh man, it's bad. It's so bad. And it's easy for them to just like, you know, like light a bomb or put a giant log on a train track and watch a derailment. Like there's so many, they've made it so easy to carry out this sort of attack, and we don't have as many.
This is why all these infrastructure attacks, especially the 100 food processing plants that have been mysteriously got on fire, will never be investigated. That's how you know it's a Fed proxy. Because here's the thing, and here's the clincher. Here's where they say the quiet part out loud. Think of it like this. We know that we are in an overshoot as a species. That means that a significant portion of the people now alive may have to die before we are back under carrying capacity.
Yeah, again, based on they always say that with this insane assertion that this is a fact.
Yeah.
And we don't really know. Like, I don't know. There's really, what is the carrying capacity? We don't even know what it is.
Mathematical models have said it's 1 billion mathematically.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, it's something, whatever it's convenient.
I think it's not radical enough for Gaia. We have to eliminate at least 90% of the world's population, maybe even more. 500 million, it would be perfect, like the great Georgia Guidestones would say.
Yeah, well, they say 500 million, I think. So
I would want all these people to say, since they still care about the earth and carbon footprints and all that, why don't they erase their own carbon footprint?
Well, that's one of those do as I say, not as I do. I think that the part of this thing with this type of person is they really want to be part of that. Like it's like with the rapture, they're kind of part of the chosen, and the sinners and evil people, they're the ones that are going to be eliminated or snuffed out or whatever. I think that's the logic.
Yeah.
Sick,
so
absolutely sick.
These guys, they all believe they've got a ticket out of the dark age.
They think they're going to be the ruling class, like we talk about all the time in Rogue. These idiots actually think that they're going to do all this, and then Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg is going to be like, finally, you guys have done it. You've eliminated the entire middle class. Now we're going to give you the means of production. We're going to give you guys the control. Here, come take over.
Well, yeah, and also they also forget that because generally people like this aren't very politically astute. Imagine if the United States, within the span of some short amount of time, went from being sort of the way it is to almost being like this sort of hippie commune, like agrarian, just live off the land. You know what the first thing that would happen? Mexican armies would advance and Reconquista would begin, or someone would come in and just take everything.
Yep.
So the thing is, that's one of the reasons why there's no way to really reject technology, because your adversaries won't. So you always sort of have to integrate it. It kind of depends how you use it, but you can't reject technology and have like your own nation state. You can be like the Amish and rely on the American nuclear missile shield and U.S. Army to protect you. But if the Amish had their own country, that country would have vanished a long time ago.
Yeah, and I mean, how
But they
easy
don't
would
think
it be
like
to
that.
pick off the Amish, right? If you just had a desire, if that intention was there on the part of those who control the levers of political and military power to just like wipe out the Amish, they could do it in a split second. I'm sorry. Like, for all of the people romantically talking about detaching and like, going into their little mini local community hives, like living like Amish people off the land because they don't like the Great Reset. I'm sorry, they're setting themselves up for being crushed massively.
You can only do that if your little community is somehow under a nuclear umbrella. Well, then maybe again, like the Amish,
local community set up like near Iran or North Korea or something like that. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's
crazy.
It's absurd. It's
really absolutely crazy. Again, these are people who forecast into a vacuum. They have no idea. They have no idea beyond their insular little world. Their insular little world. They live in some, God knows where, USA. They think the rest of the world they're just so stupid. The level of low IQ involvement is I'm dumbfounded. I really am.
Yeah, but it's similar in many ways to ISIS, because you got to think like, what is the psychology of somebody who is living in an absurd situation culturally, economically in the Middle East, who finds themselves all of a sudden recruited to this divine mission where they're getting paid all of a sudden money. They're offered, all they have to do is like risk, they have to just do jihad. And they see, do some of these figures not see a contradiction in the fact that there are Western military forces providing them logistical, military, monetary support to carry out an overthrow of Gaddafi or Bashar al-Assad? I would think that they see that there's something contradictory, but they ultimately see that there is this higher divine plan that favors them. So when
that's what it is, and they also think, they also think that the enemy of my enemy is my Habibi.
Kind of, yeah. So, I mean, these eco-anarchists are probably, or eco-terrorists, I should just call them that, are probably also aware, some of them at least, that, you have U.S. intelligence, high-level establishment forces within the U.S. government and other broader European governments protecting them. And you'd think that they might think that that's a contradiction, but then you have people who, like the head of one of the co-founders of Extinction Rebellion, his name is, what's his name here? I got it up here. Roger Hallam, he does a YouTube video called "Should We Take the Money of Billionaires?" And his answer is, well, yes, of course we should. He says, quote, "We are dealing," this is the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, right? He says, yes, we're dealing with people who cry at night, just like we do. We don't want them to commit suicide. No, we want them to ring us up and give us that million quid. That's like $1.3 million. And of course, he's talking about people like George Soros, whose Tides Foundation supplies massive amounts of revenue to Extinction Rebellion. The Goldsmith operation, Teddy Goldsmith, billionaire, oligarch, British billionaires from the city of London, who are running the Rockefeller Foundation, which is providing massive money to the Children Investment Foundation, which gives money to the Extinction Rebellion. All of these things are being funded by giant billionaire. Bloomberg is another one, Bill Gates. And they're saying, like, yeah, we should take money because they cry just like we do at night. They have their conscience weighing heavily on them for the destruction that their economic activity is in nature.
The thing you kind of missed out, maybe the answer to your question is a bit of compartmentalization, because like with especially Black Lives Matter, the organizers are the ones who got to get the nice mansions after the protests were over, whereas sort of the masses of people participating were very removed from the process, and they don't really see the bigger chain. So perhaps they're sort of at the bottom of the pyramid, and so they can't see the glorious capstone at the top made of gold or whatever,
Yeah.
So
exactly.
That could be it. I'm also always amazed. Number one is even more so, I would say, my one friend who's French, he convinced me of this, and he said that the most paradoxically stupid group of people are French nationalists. He said because they all come from amazing backgrounds. Impeccable, their language, the way they speak, they're all extremely well read, highly educated, even like the guys who are like the mercenary types, but they all support Ukraine. So these like French nationalists support the globalist war against Russia, and they think somehow with this Ukraine, because I guess they're Nazis, that's going to like somehow be good for France in the future. That's the one that's truly unbelievable. How someone who is a nationalist can fight for the Western status quo, which is the exact definition of the opposite.
Yeah, that's this Cartesian poison embedded in the French education system, which results in like seemingly smart people. Like you listen to the quality of talking head debates and shows that they have on French TV, and you compare it to the type of crap we have in the West, which is just jelly in comparison.
Yeah.
But it's a form of like smart stupid, where they they all speak with this exact same archetype.
That's good, man.
Their word is truth, all of them. And they have the worst fucking decrepit opinions that are gonna like blow up the world that they all end up falling into. There's obviously a faction of reasonable French patriots who are still sort of, breathing. But I mean, it's wild how many smart, stupid people there are in France. Yeah, it's wild. I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just a tribalism thing. People are like, well, I believe in nationalism, and these people look like nationalists like I do, so they have to be the good guys. Let's support them. It's like, oh, I don't know. It's bizarre. Absolutely. This whole Ukrainian war has really been an interesting thought experiment in the nature of what human beings believe in, what contradictions they're willing to ignore or accept, or it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So,
Unbelievable. Gentlemen, thank you, both of you guys, for being on. It's been so much fun. We got to do this again. We got to get the whole team together next time. But any last things you want to say? Go ahead, Tim, and then Matt.
Oh, let's see. I guess with this whole pipeline thing, now we have some different versions of the whole pipeline story. So we could originally it was blame the Russians for destroying their own pipeline. Now we have blame anti-Putin forces within Russia, and the German version is to blame the Ukrainians. So I think maybe the picture of an off-ramp is kind of starting to come together here, especially the German version. So perhaps we can just sort of say, we being in the people in Washington can just say, hey, but the Ukrainians fooled us. They're the ones who destroyed the pipeline and kind of started all of this. Oh no, even though it doesn't really make sense to do the timeline of events, but who cares? It'll be good enough to just step back and let it all play itself out. So
magical stories are not just for environmentalist wackos. It's also for think tanks that are in the United States.
Exactly. So I think that's something that's going to be very relevant in the near future in terms of like, the dialogue of what's going on with this.
Good, man.
Matt, your final words?
No, absolutely. I think the British hand also has been sort of consciously left out of this. Gray Zone has done some really great reporting on different elements of British intelligence behind the both the Kerch Bridge blow up as well as the Nord Stream attack. So I think ultimately people should be putting a little bit more mind work as well and thinking about the real Anglo origins or causal nexus of the international deep state operations that have their different aspects in Davos cliques in the city of London. Obviously, is the Center Financial Command, Wall Street, the American intelligence, Israeli intelligence. I mean, Israel itself was, after all, set up by the Balfour Accords, by British intelligence back in World War I periods. Saudi intelligence is going through its own existential fight with this thing, but Saudi Arabia was also set up as a British intelligence operation. There's nothing that has not been directly impacted in the world that we live in on any level, including the cultural levers in terms of what controlled the CIA's influence over Hollywood, the influence over European culture through the Congress of Cultural Freedom during the Cold War, that basically turned entertainment into predictive programming. Very little that we've experienced and been shaped by, whether it's Soylent Green, 2001: A Space Odyssey, that started like infusing ideas of what AI is this superhuman force that will inevitably supersede human beings and make us as obsolete as the dinosaurs were when the mammals sprang up. All this shit has been done with the intention to create emotional and psychological effects within us that would render us psycho-spiritually impotent and inclined only to adapt to unjust situations created for us by those who want to restore, a zoo-like feudalism, which has always been the agenda. So people need to really inoculate themselves from a lot of this crap, separate our who we are from those influences, which takes a bit of time, but it's doable. And it helps really start seeing what insidious intentions were always there. And then look at the sort of beautiful future that we could feasibly have if we can like steer ourselves through this oncoming, few years ahead, which is going to be very tumultuous. But if we have the wits and the moral fitness to survive, we're going to be able to navigate through this by being informed of the best examples of human civilization of the past and think about, well, what are actual adults in the room who are utilizing political power to do things, not in our part of the world here in the transatlantic, unfortunately, but they're there. They're in Eurasia. They're actually acting upon historical forces, and there are historical forces that are at play. It's based upon a battle of ideas, concepts. Human beings are the only species that shapes our species character around concepts, whether right or wrong, about the universe's creator, ourselves, made in the image and a product of that universe. Other species don't do that. They're just purely, shaped by genetic impulses and maybe the environment, in some mix. Human beings have that, but we have the additional thing too. So when we tap into that, we can do miracles. We can overcome limits to growth. We can prove these computer models are wrong. And we can really demonstrate that technology is the expression of something much more beautiful and good, and not just something designed to enslave us for an oligarchical elite. So, but that again is not something we get in our education system. It's not something we get very much in our cynical, black-pilled culture, which just reinforces that space is this place where nobody can hear you scream and aliens go to kill you. It's something other than humans, Whereas you think like JFK, you think like, somebody who's a little bit more dignified. You look at space, you look at the universe, and you see something that is made in a lawful, harmonic way that is our destiny and our right to explore together as a species, independent of our local, ethnic impulses or linguistic, whatever. I mean, the thing that unites us is we're made in a universe that has.
Oh yeah, dude. Like, you want to talk about mental programming? I think one of the things that was most shocking to me about space that I've ever heard was someone once told me that, well, it's going to be awful that we're trying to go to Mars because we'll ruin it too. Oh, like that. That's I think the culmination of everything you were saying, kind of coming into one.
That's good. Yeah, let's end it with that. That's
yeah. I thought you'd like that one.
Very well said, gentlemen. Thank you so much for both of you guys for being on, folks. Again, you can find Tim over at Tim Kirby Hardcore over in Telegram, as well as Matthew Arrett. You can find him over at CanadianPatriot.org, and the RisingTideFoundation.net, and yours truly over at RogueNews.com, RogueNews.com. Thank you, and we're over and out.